Welcome to episode 178 of Real Health Radio. You can find the links talked about as part of this episode at the show notes, which is www.7, so the word all spelled out, seven-health.com/178. Real Health Radio is brought to you by 7 Health. 7 Health works with women who feel obsessed with and defined by their bodies. Using a non-diet, weight-neutral approach that combines science and compassion, we help you transform your physical, mental, and emotional health. We specialize in helping clients with disordered eating and eating disorders, hormonal issues like hypothalamic amenorrhea, and helping clients recover from dieting and learn how to listen to their body. We're currently taking on new clients. If any of these are areas you'd like help with, then please get in contact. You can head over to www.7-health.com/help, so HELP, and there you can read about how we work with clients and apply for a free initial chat. So the address again is www.7-health.com/help, and I'll also include that in the show notes. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Real Health Radio. I'm your host, Chris Sandel, and this week on the show, it's another guest episode, and it's actually a returning guest in Summer Innanen. So Summer is a professionally trained coach specializing in body image, body positivity, self-worth, and confidence. She helps women all over the world to stop living behind the numbers on their scale through her private and group coaching at summerinnanen.com. She is the best-selling author of Body Image Remix and host of Fearless Rebelle Radio, a podcast dedicated to empowering women to live life on their own terms. So Summer first appeared on the podcast in episode 16, so over 4 years ago. And since that time, we've kept in semi-regular contact. We jump on Skype every now and again and have a chat. So this conversation was actually really overdue. And there were two main areas that we wanted to cover, or I wanted to cover as part of this. And one of them is all around parenthood. So Summer has a 1-year-old child called Dylan. I have a 2-year-old son called Ramsey. And so I wanted to talk about what we've been through as new parents. And this isn't just me asking some of these questions. I share a lot about my history and what we've done as parents. I touch on miscarriage, co-sleeping, sleep deprivation, baby-led weaning, and just the various ups and downs of parenthood. And then the other topic that I wanted to cover was the business side of things. So running a coaching business and what that looks like, and then actually the coaching side and being with clients. And we talk about what it looks like in terms of building a business, as we've both been in this for over a decade. And then we talk about content creation, the writing process, courses that we've done that have really helped us, when in conversations, not shying away from difficult areas or difficult emotions, the power of laughter in client sessions. And this felt very informal and like a conversation between two friends, which it is. And I probably talk more in this interview than in most because it was so much like a regular conversation. And before I get on with this episode, I just want to mention that this will be the final new episode for the year. So next week will be a rebroadcast episode, and I really can't believe that 2019 is coming to an end. It feels like it's just flown by so quickly. It really has been an incredible year in so many ways, and I'm incredibly excited to be ending it by taking on 2 new members of the 7 Health team, so Lou and Amanda. So I'm really looking forward to 2020. Thank you for listening to this podcast and for providing feedback. And yeah, I feel incredibly lucky that this is a component of my job and how I get to spend some of my time. Have a wonderful holiday season and new year. I hope you are getting some time off to spend with friends or family. We will be back with the podcast in the new year, with the first episode being my annual favorite books, documentaries, and podcast episodes from the year. So let's get on with this week's show. Here is my conversation with Summer Innanen. Hey Summer, welcome back to Real Health Radio. It's a pleasure to have you back on the show.
Hi Chris, thanks so much for having me back. It's been a little while, hasn't it?
It has. So I was looking into this before we we started recording. And so it was November of 2015, so over 4 years ago.
Wow.
I think you were the somewhere around the eighth guest that I interviewed. And so, yeah, very, very early on in my podcasting career when I was still a newbie to all this. And I think in the intervening years, there's lots that has happened in both our lives and in our businesses. And that's kind of what I want to cover as part of this episode. So we both now have kids. So I want to talk about that piece and the whole parenthood piece. And you're a more recent parent than I am. And then you also have a really great series of emails that are directed specifically at coaches. And I know that we've had some private conversations over the years about wanting to do programs or trainings that are directed at practitioners. And so, yeah, I want to cover some of that too. And I think that will be some of the skills for being a good practitioner, but also giving an honest representation of what it's like running a business, because there's a lot of hype online. There's a lot of people who feel badly just because they're trying to live up to some unrealistic expectation of what it should be like running a business. And I also think like we've gone through a lot of similar things in terms of how long we've been practitioners. And so, yeah, I would love to be able to chime in and share my perspective and my side of the story. So like, please feel free for you to ask me questions as well. So it's not just me trying to interview you, but us having a conversation around all of this.
Sure. Yeah, sounds good. I love talking about all of those things.
Awesome. So look, to start with, for anyone who missed our original episode or doesn't know who you are, do you want to get a bit of background on yourself, like who you are, what you do, what trainings you've done, that sort of thing?
Sure. So I'm a professionally trained coach that specializes in helping women with self-worth, confidence, and body image. And the evolution to get there, I'll just sort of give an abbreviated version of the story, because I probably gave a more in-depth one when you first had me on 4 years ago, which I can't believe.
And I will put a link to that in the show notes as well, so people can then check out that first episode. So even though I think I was probably pretty terrible as an interviewer, it's worth a listen from Summer's side.
Well, I was going to say I'm probably going to be embarrassed if I were to listen to it again, because I've evolved and changed I'm sure everybody does. And that's a good sign if you can look at your old stuff and sort of think, oh, I could have said that better. It means you've grown. Personally, I really struggled with my body image growing up, and I was a chronic dieter for decades of my life. Like decades of my life was wasted on obsessing over food and obsessing over my body, and I became hyper focused on nutrition, and at one point in time got really into like paleo nutrition and all of that stuff. And I was working a corporate job. So I'd been working in the corporate world for 10 years. And I remember saying to myself, I can't do this for 30 more years. Like I cannot do this job for 30 more years. So what do I want to do with my life? And because I was so entrenched in diet culture and obsessed with food and working out, I thought, well, why don't I make a career out of that and become a nutritionist? And so, one of my first trainings was going back to school to become a nutritionist. And I actually started a nutrition blog. I think it was like in 2009. And I started practicing as a nutritionist shortly after that. Eventually quit my corporate job to do that full time. But kind of went through my own rock bottom moment during that time where I realized that my quote unquote obsession with health was actually damaging my physical well-being as well as my mental well-being. My hormones were the same as a postmenopausal woman, and I just wasn't feeling great. And no matter what I did, I couldn't change the size of my body anymore. Whereas in the beginning, like diets did work in the short term always, but then they actually just stopped working completely. It didn't matter what I did. Nothing could change my body. And so I knew that at that time, it really wasn't about my body. It was really about changing my relationship with food and detaching my self-worth from my body size and really doing the deep inner work on my body image. So that was all. The catalyst to that was, going to see my naturopathic doctor who I was working with around the hormone stuff. And she was looking at the foods I was eating and kind of shaking her head and being like, do you eat any carbohydrates? And okay, you're going to have to start eating carbohydrates and you need to stop doing CrossFit and all these things. And I just started crying because I was upset that she was telling me I couldn't, go to the gym anymore, or I had to take time off. And I had to, eat foods that I had been like religiously avoiding. And so that's when I really had like my wake up call moment. I was like, I'm more upset about that than I am about the fact that like, she said to me, I'm surprised you're alive because of your hormones and everything else. And so that's when I found intuitive eating. I started to read some books on self-compassion and body image. And I worked with some coaches there and it really made me realize like, oh my goodness, like all the things that I was preaching with clients is just so disordered and coming from this place of propping up fat phobia and diet culture and which I apologize to anyone who ever received that information from me. But and I realized like there's this other way, and like there's not a lot of people talking about this, like that we can really eat what we want and look after ourselves from a place of compassion, and it doesn't involve like hating yourself and all this other stuff that's promoted in our culture. And so that's when I really kind of did a major pivot in my business, and I went back and took 2 different life coaching programs. So I mentored with Tara Moore. I did her facilitators training program, which she specifically focuses around helping women with self-doubt and fear, which is a huge part of healing our body image and just living a bigger life.
Yeah.
I trained at the Coaches Training Institute and for their life coaching. And so, completely rebranded everything that I was doing and wrote a book 5 years ago called Body Image Remix and launched the podcast about 5 years ago too, Fearless Rebel Radio. So, and now, I have group programs and I help people all over the world, with helping them to feel better about themselves and really detach their worth from their appearance.
Nice. So look, I think that whole piece I'm going to come back to second, and let's start more with the parenthood piece. So how old is your son?
At the time of this recording, he is 14 months old. So we are entering toddlerhood, which I kind of thought things could get easier, and now I'm realizing they don't. They get like more chaotic, I would say. Whereas he used to I could just leave him on the floor and like leave the room for 5 minutes. Now it's like, I got to make sure that he doesn't kill himself. I need to be like always arm's reach. And he's got a lot more opinions now, like very strong opinions on things. So he was a real easygoing baby, and he's got more of an like his parents, like his mom mostly.
Yeah. And so when did you decide you wanted to be a parent? Like, is this something that had been a thing that you'd been wanting to do for a really long time, or is it hit you kind of later?
Yes, it hit me later. I never wanted kids. I never had that inclination. I never had what people call, that your clock is ticking. Like I always just said, I don't have a clock. My clock didn't come with a battery. And then, and we designed our lives that way. My husband and I, we've been married for 11 and a half years now, been together for 16 years. And it was just something that was never on my radar at all. And then when I was 37 and a half, it was August. And one day I was in my bedroom folding laundry, and all of a sudden this like feeling came over me that said, I think I want to have a family. And it was the strangest moment, one of the strangest moments of my life. I remember it so vividly, so viscerally. It was so strange. It was like all of a sudden, like that clock turned on. And I tried to push it away. I tried to ignore it. And my first reaction was like, who the hell just said that? But I tried to push it away and ignore it because I was like, this just intellectually makes no sense. Like, where is this coming from? And intellectually, like, I was like, I don't want a kid. Like, this doesn't fit with our lives. And it wasn't until a month later that I actually had the conversation with Mike, my husband, and said, I think I want a family. And he started laughing and said, you're joking, right? And I started to cry and I was like, no, and I'm so confused. And we really sat with it for about a year because I didn't want to pressure him. He really needed to kind of come around to this idea. And so in that time frame, I said, well, why don't we just go to see a couple doctors? Like, let's just see if this is even possible for us, because I had that history with my hormones not working optimally. And although I had not been on like any kind of hormones for a few months, I was still experiencing quite terrible symptoms around my period, and my cycles were really short, and so I just wasn't sure. And my age, I was, at the time that we went to see a doctor about it, I was 38, and so we went to a fertility clinic, and she tested, I think it's called your AMH, it's like whatever tests your ovarian reserve, and she said, like, you really don't have, like, you're kind of, I was sort of in the range of like someone in their 40s versus someone who is not quite 40. And she said, you could give it a couple months and then I would intervene. And so we, again, sat on the decision for a few more months because I really wanted to try to heal some of the stuff that was going on with my menstrual cycle. So I saw a couple like functional medicine doctors about that. And anyways, fast forward a couple months later, I was sitting there and I think I was talking to the fertility doctor again for some reason. Maybe that was when I got the results of the test. I might be kind of messing up the timeline a bit here. In any event, my husband said, listen, like, are you going to regret not doing this and not trying? And I said, yes, I'm going to regret it if we don't at least try. And so he said, well, let's just try. And then I got pregnant a month later. So clearly my body was like, don't change your mind. We're throwing a Hail Mary pass down the fallopian tube. This one is going to win. And so I'm so lucky because I have a lot of clients. I do have colleagues too, but clients and friends who really struggled with infertility. And so I do feel so fortunate because the odds were not stacked in our favor and it happened so easily for me. But and now I think both Mike and I, we can't imagine our lives without Dylan and without Parenthood. I think we both love it. It's our favorite. It's the favorite. It's our favorite. It's the best part of our lives.
Nice.
Yeah.
So I and Ali, my other half, we are those people who it took a lot longer for. So I think for us it was nearly 3 years, somewhere in that ballpark, and we had 3 miscarriages and an ectopic pregnancy that resulted in emergency surgery as part of all that. So yeah, we had quite a journey getting to the place of actually having a child. And so yeah, it just, I mean, we're kind of similar ages, and yeah, we just didn't have the easy time of it. And so yeah, that's definitely given me a lot more empathy when talking with clients around this stuff, and just having more of a just an understanding of what it's like, because it definitely, I would say, miscarriage is something that really isn't talked about very much, and same with ectopic pregnancy isn't really talked about that much. And then when you look at the statistics around it, just how common both of those things are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I always wonder why is our culture that way? Like, why is that the norm? They say, wait to tell people until, it's been like 12 or 13 weeks, which I understand from like a social media public post perspective, but wouldn't you want people to know so that if something happens, you can then reach out to them for support earlier? That was always my feeling about it. Because I would want to help a friend if they went through a miscarriage. I don't feel there should be so much secrecy around it. I think, to your, if people want to keep things private, I understand that. But, yeah, I don't know what your thoughts are on that, but I always just felt like, we should talk about these things more openly, because it just happens. It's so common. And, not a lot of people open up about it.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember back to what happened with us. I think probably with the first one or two, it was still kind of a private thing, and then look, when it would then happen, we would open up to friends or select friends and talk about it. But I think it was more, and even with the ectopic, I think my family, the first they heard about it was when I'm messaging them from the emergency room saying, "Hey, just want to let you know Hallie's about to go in for surgery," and so I don't know, and I don't, like, I'm not a particularly superstitious person, but I do remember, I mean, when Hallie then got pregnant, that then resulted in Ramsey. We told everyone, or we told certain people very early on. And I think that part of that was also, we found out when we were out in Australia. So I think we found out, and then next morning had breakfast with my parents, and we're like, "Hey, by the way, we've got something to tell you." So I think at that stage we were talking about it earlier, but yeah, it wasn't. It definitely felt like something that every time it happened, it was something that was more just for us, and I don't know why that is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think it's obviously a personal choice, but culturally, I feel like I just feel like that's like kind of like a cultural norm that you don't talk about it. Yeah.
And then when you would talk about it, there would be a lot of, "Oh yeah, we went through that," it was just like, I wish I'd known this more at the start, like more people went through this, as opposed to you find it out after the fact. So that when it did happen, you could know, like, to reach out to specifically people where it had actually happened, as opposed to finding out some way through the grapevine that had occurred.
Yeah, because I imagine there's just a lot of grief around it, and very difficult. And I think that would be so hard.
Mm. And so tell me then, I mean, you said like Parenthood is wonderful, but yeah, tell me about the first, 3 months or 6 months, or how was the early days with it?
It hard. It's so hard. I still like look at other new parents, and I'm like, maybe there's just something wrong with me. Like, I just don't have my act together. I just found it really tough in terms of the impact that the sleep deprivation had on me. I'm a terrible sleeper to begin with, and so one of the biggest things I struggled with was having to wake up and then having to go back to sleep. So there were so many nights where I would, he would wake up for the first feeding in the night, and then I would not be able to fall back asleep. And then I would just be even more of a disaster all day. And I felt like a real kind of zombie for several months, I would say. Initially, my maternity leave was only going to be 6 months. And then as I neared 4 months, I thought, there's no way I can go back right now. Like, I cannot really focus properly or remember things or speak coherently in a way that, I would want to be able to communicate on my podcast or on social media or with clients. And so I extended it. That wasn't the only reason I extended it. I wanted to just spend more time with him. I wasn't ready to have him go into care. But that, I think that was the thing that surprised me the most, was just the impact it had on my brain, on my ability to really think clearly and creatively and spell things like that, write a proper sentence. It was just it was so significant for me. And so, I really struggled with sleep anxiety, insomnia, and then the residual impacts to the way my brain was functioning. And then we had a lot of breastfeeding challenges too. And so, that was a real struggle that got a lot easier after, I would say, 2 or 3 months. We finally kind of were able to figure that out. But I was never one of those people who could go out in public with a newborn and not worry because I could just feed him anywhere. I was I have to be home because this is such a clunky mess. I probably wouldn't care so much if I were to do it again, because I really wouldn't care what people think. But being a new parent, I was just oh, I don't want other people, witnessing this, or I don't want to have to deal with this. It's just easier for me to kind of stay closer to home. And so I didn't really get out much the first 3 months. And then that's when I made the decision to just get out and just start doing some classes, some mom and baby stuff, and meet other moms and go for coffees and make those connections. And that made the whole thing so much easier. And also just once you get past that 3-4 month point, things just start to become easier, I would say, relatively speaking.
Yeah. Did the sleep get better by that stage?
Well, we sleep trained at 5 months. So yes, it got better, and I know that's not for everyone. We made that decision, collectively, between my husband and I, to do some gentle sleep training when he was that age, and still do, a night feed. But, that honestly was such a radical change for me to not have to help with some of that anxiety that I had around bedtime. And also my back couldn't take bouncing on a ball for an hour to get him to fall asleep. I was falling apart physically and mentally. And so his sleep didn't, it kind of got better, then it got worse. Then we did sleep training and then it got better, and he's actually a pretty good sleeper, and now he's a great sleeper. So yeah, I don't know. Did you sleep train, or is that I know that's more of a North American thing?
No, we didn't. I mean, sleep deprivation is just the worst, and I can completely. I hear you, just walking through treacle and just brain turning to mush when I'm not getting good sleep. And the thing is, for both Ali and I, before Ramsey was born, and even now, sleep is on our top of to-do list. So even before he came along, we would be the ones who were taking ourselves to bed at 8:30 or 9 o'clock or 9:30 and getting a solid 9 hours sleep. Gone are the days of us being out late drinking and going to parties and all of that. It was just we just like sleep, need sleep, and prioritize it. And when I do that, life is so much easier. And so when that was then taken away because you've got this newborn child, we neither of us do cope well without sleep. And so that was pretty apparent. But he was, the first handful of months is just a mess, and sometimes it would be good sleep, sometimes it wouldn't, but it was just all over the place. But he was pretty good as a sleeper. But the caveat with that was he was pretty good as a sleeper because he stayed in our bed. And so we had a cot in our room that I think got used very, very infrequently. And I remember there was a period for must have been about a month where we could get him to fall asleep and put him in the cot, and then he would wake up at some point, and it would then take me the best part of about 2 hours to try and get him back in the cot. So I'd have this point of just walking around the room with this weight in my arms, trying to get him to sleep for about 2 hours to then have him fall asleep maybe, and then wake up a little bit later. And so at some point I was just like, okay, this is nonsense. I cannot do this. And so he then just came back into our bed, and actually both of us really enjoyed having that. And again, I know it's not for everyone, but we really liked having him in our bed. And we won't be having any more kids. And I've touched on this in another podcast, and maybe we can get into it here. But Ali had a pretty horrible first year in terms of health stuff from having Ramsey, so diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis, and then had to have a number of operations for an infection, and she was just in a bad way for pretty much a whole year. And with the rheumatoid arthritis, part of the juggling act that your body does when you get pregnant is to get your immune system not to identify the fetus that you're growing as non-self and try and kill it. And so it does this juggling act so that is allowed to grow, and that can then have an impact on a lot of autoimmune conditions, because that's part of the problem with autoimmune conditions is you're misidentifying self as non-self and starting to attack it. So for a lot of people with autoimmune conditions, whether that be rheumatoid arthritis or Hashimoto's or other conditions, pregnancy can have a real impact. And some people, they get way better during pregnancy, and then afterwards it comes back and it hits them like a ton of bricks, or sometimes it gets worse during pregnancy. And it's just, we had such a year that neither of us are wanting to roll that dice again. And so we were with just knowing that that's not going to happen again, we were very much happy to have him in our bed. And we got really good sleep. So after the initial period, he would sleep really well, and he'd wake up, and there'd be times where he'd be having feeds, but then when he stopped having feeds in the night, he would just wake up, want to have a cuddle, and he'd just fall straight back to sleep. So in a fairly short amount of time, I don't know how many months it was, we were back into a routine where we were getting sort of 7, 8, 9 hours of sleep a night, which is, I don't know, pretty highly unlikely for a lot of new parents. So there was part of me is like, why would I want to change this when I prize sleep so much and I know how much better I feel with it? Why would I want to be doing something that's going to jeopardize that?
Yeah. Well, I think that's the thing is you have to, as a parent, you have to make the choices that work best for you. And that can look a lot different. I would never be able to sleep with Dylan in our bed. First of all, their mattress it would not work. But I always have a fan blasting on my face, which is it wouldn't work. I'm the lightest sleeper in the world. It would not work. And I've said I can't wait till he's a little older and then he can, because then I think we could probably make it work. But I think it's one of those things that you have to do what's best for you, and it's okay. And I think that, and I don't know if you notice this too, but there's just there's a lot of judgment or non-acceptance for people who do it the other way. For people who choose to do things in a different way, and I think that's really unfortunate, because why people are not robots, babies are not robots. You have to make different choices that are going to be best for you and your child and your family. And so I just wish people would be more accepting of those things and not be so critical of other people's decisions.
Definitely. And I think that often comes to light for parents when they have a second child who is then completely different to the first.
Yes,
where
exactly.
they're like, oh, hang on a second, I thought it worked because we were doing all of those things right. And it's like, no, they're just now a completely different person, and things are very different with the temperament of that individual, and with the ability or lack of ability to sleep or whatever it may be. So yeah, I'm very much trying to be like, look, this has worked for us. It's not going to necessarily work for other people. And it's so we didn't have a second room at the time when he was first born. So the second room was what I was using as my office, and then subsequently we built an office in the garden, and he has now has his own room. And when we moved him into his own room and instantly moved him into an adult side double bed, so that in the night if he wakes up and wants a cuddle, we can go in, and it's normally Ali who goes in, and then can just sleep with him for the rest of the night, or sleep with him for as long as she wants, without having to cramp into a tiny single bed and get horrible sleep.
That's smart.
So he got the exact same bed that we have from IKEA, just in the double bed size.
Yeah, that's smart. That's great.
And what about you? I mean, I mentioned a little bit about Ali and her physical stuff after birth, and how are you just physically recovering from that?
I think I was pretty lucky. I think midwives kept telling me I was made for having babies. I probably should have started years ago.
if only you'd been given a clock.
Yes, if only I'd been given a clock. No, my recovery was like not too bad at all. I was really gentle with myself though, and I worked with a pelvic floor physiotherapist towards the latter half of my pregnancy, and then in the first few months postpartum, and she was really skilled and really had me kind of preparing for pelvic floor health and what would happen, and then afterwards doing the rehab around that, and she kept me out of the gym for 3 months. Like, I was like, when can I start to maybe go back? And she's like, nope, not yet. And I did a lot of walking, and as I said, bouncing on a ball. That was like, so I was like active in a way, but like I wanted to kind of go back to doing just some of the stuff that I enjoy, like with a barbell and things like that. And she really was like, no. Whereas like a lot of other people give you a pass, I think at like 6 weeks, like doctors are kind of like, after 6 weeks, like you're good to go. And she really made me wait. And I think that was like a real gift, because I have not suffered any sort of ramifications, I think, other than, like my neck or my back from carrying him around. I'm just more sensitive to those types of injuries than I used to be. But the one thing that was like really great so far, which could still change, is like I mentioned having sort of horrible PMS symptoms. And for me, that was always like excruciating cramps that they actually sort of think that I maybe had undiagnosed endometriosis, but that's kind of a sidebar conversation. And I haven't had that since I had the baby. So I don't know if that's going to change, because I know I'm still breastfeeding. So there's still like hormonal shifts that will take place when we fully wean. But that has been one great thing that my body somehow changed. It's like not having debilitating cramps that last 7 days, where I have to sometimes miss work, or where no painkillers would help me. So I guess contrary to Ali, like I didn't really have too much that happened, which was a gift.
Yeah, and it's good. Like I think you got some good advice in terms of just take it slowly. And I mean, I think when we were getting things checked out, because she's like, I just like things don't feel right. Like I shouldn't be in this much pain now, 6 weeks on or 8 weeks on, or I shouldn't be struggling to be able to walk. She was just kind of brushed off with like, oh look, things take time to heal after pregnancy, and in the end found out that wasn't the case, and there was something much more sinister going on. But it's definitely it depends on the person. Like I was out last year at Christmas in Australia, and my brother and his partner, they had their third child, and we went to the beach, I think 3 or 4 or 5 days after the baby was born, and like Liz, the mom, was like playing with the other kids, jumping in and out of the rock pool. Like, you would have never guessed that she'd given birth 5 days prior. Like, it was just insane. And yeah, that's just like, sometimes it's just the luck of the draw. Like there was nothing that Ali did differently to what she did, and it just, like, bodies are different, pregnancies are different, births are different, and they affect things differently.
Yeah. And I think it's like, there's no, like, we don't need to, praise people who do kind of get back into things faster too. Like that was always something that I think, we feel pressured to do, like to kind of, get back into things and be in shape, and I'm putting all these things in quotation marks. The pressure to kind of be like the super mom, I guess. It infuriates me how much our culture praises that and puts that as like someone of higher value. Like, it's like, oh, like, wow, look at her, good for you, look at all you can do. Whereas I'm more the opposite. I'm like, good for you for resting, like, good for you for slowing down in spite of all the pressure not to do that. Because, like, there's this amazing book called The Fourth Trimester, which I've talked about a ton on my podcast because it's just so good. But it really tells you, like, the first 6 weeks, you should just rest. Like, you should not do anything other than look after the baby, look after yourself, but no cooking, no cleaning. Like, have people to do all that for you, which I know is a privilege. But to kind of round up a village, so to speak, which is what they do in every other culture, like in Asian cultures, they, like, the whole family comes around, and the woman doesn't do anything for 6 weeks, and it allows that time for your body to really heal. And I think that's like, it's such an important thing to account for and to try to prepare for in advance. That was something that I put a lot of. I asked for a lot of help around that. So I made sure that we had family with us for the first 6 weeks, because we live on the other side of the country from our immediate family. And that was such a godsend in a way, because I was able to really take that time to rest and, like, stay kind of as horizontal as possible, so to speak. Obviously, like, you go for walks and you start to do really gentle things, but the first 6 weeks to really just kind of try to focus on resting and, like, napping and sleeping as much as you can, even though it's all disjointed and not restorative in the same way. But I think that it's important for other people listening to know that that I think takes a lot of strength and to rest, actually, and to kind of push through all the shoulds that we feel like we need to be doing in order to measure up to be a good parent. Yeah.
And I think, I had a slightly different experience as well. So my parents live on the other side of the world in Australia, and then Ali's parents are separated, and they're in Scotland in different locations. And so we had Ali's mom come down, I think 3 days or 4 days after Ramsey was born, but then also moved house 10 days after he was born. So we we're trying to buy a house all through that year, and everything just got held up. And so we kind of pushed it back so that we were hoping he would be, 3 or 4 weeks old by the time we moved in. And in the end, he was just way late. And so, we had to move house 10 days afterwards. And, like, the best money I've ever spent is removalists who packed everything up for us.
Yes.
Like, I was like, there is no way I can do this. And then was really great having Ali's mom helping, because then her and Ali would be able to do stuff with Rams, and I was then able to kind of sort out the house for the first week. And so I think what often happens when you move house is that 3 months later, you're still like, oh, we need to finish off some of those boxes. And I was like, I've got to get this done now while we have some help here. And so I think I had the whole house pretty much set up, bar certain furniture that we needed to get within about 5 or 6 days. So that was then that was then
that's ambitious.
That was then good. But yeah, I like top tip: don't move house 10 days after having a child. That is not something I recommend.
No, I almost feel like 3 or 4 weeks later would be even worse though, because the sleep deprivation starts to really catch up to you around then. I feel like week 4 was one of the harder ones for me, if I can recall. You're still running out of adrenaline in the beginning.
Yeah, and I think like it was nice that it happened afterwards though, because I think we were initially trying to see if we could get it to happen beforehand, but it meant that those last handful of weeks before Ramsey was born, we were able to just chill out and enjoy ourselves, and we weren't trying to pack up a house and move things around and all of that. We were like, okay, we know we're going to be here, and so we can just take this time. So that was kind of good. But yeah, just I guess moving house any time around a child being born is not advised.
That's a solid piece of advice.
Yeah. And what about, I mean, pre-mom, pre-parenthood life? Like, is there any bits that you, I don't know, mourn or struggle with, and I don't know, in some ways wish could come back?
I think that I wish I had really enjoyed the freedom that we had before a little bit more. Not even enjoyed, but just appreciated it. I think, my husband and I joke around that our fantasy is to go to a hotel for 24 hours and like not even talk to each other and just sleep with blackout blinds. It's like, that's our fantasy now. And we always joke around. And we're like, we used to talk about how we were too busy before kids, and we had so much time. What were we doing with that time that made it seem like we were busy when we weren't at all. So yeah, we joke about things like that. But I think for me, because I waited so long I'm 40 now. So, I was like, my approaching 40 when I had Dylan. I had lived my life in terms of going out and, trying restaurants, and like we were kind of at a point where we were, going to bed earlier on weekends, and I would sort of be like, oh, I hope I don't have any social engagements this weekend. I just want to just lay low. So I don't really miss that. We traveled a whole bunch. Like we did a lot before because we waited till we were, later in life. I think it was a hard year in that all of my good friends, we all turned 40 and they all live on the other side of the country, and I had to miss out on all the celebrations. Like a bunch of them did weekends away and things like that I probably would have been able to attend a couple of them. I would have flown back for them had I not had Dylan. So I was pretty sad about that. But in terms of anything else, I don't really have any kind of mourning over it, because I feel like I enjoyed the time I had before to its fullest, and really got to experience a lot. But there's parts that I think coming back to work, it's hard because I don't have as much time to focus on it as I did before. And I think we were talking about before you started recording, we used to be able to just kind of get in more hours and use that to resolve any issues and things like that. And now you kind of have to practice letting something, at least I do, letting some things go, not being so hard on myself because I just don't have the capacity that I used to. And that's certainly definitely been a bit of a mental struggle that I've had to walk myself through, because life is changed, and it's like chaos in the morning, then work, and then chaos at night, and there's very little downtime. So I miss the downtime, but I don't mourn it, because I'm happier overall now.
Yeah, definitely. And I am in agreement on that in terms of missing the downtime. I think that's been, for me, the biggest challenge, is just I used to spend so much time on my own, and I really like alone time. And I've been reading a lot around introverts and extroverts. I really like Susan Cain's Quiet book. I've read the Highly Sensitive Person's book by Elaine Aaron. I can never remember her surname, but and so I'm like, do I identify as being highly sensitive? And I'm not sure that I do with all of it, but there's definitely characteristics of it. And I know how much I need alone time in the same way as I need sleep. And I think that's been the biggest difficulty, is just that doesn't happen to any degree that it used to. And the time that it does happen is when I'm working, but that's not the same as like having downtime where there is space to just be and to just think, and just where you're not trying to get through a list of tasks because you're now trying to do, I don't know, a 60-hour week in 35 hours or 30 hours or whatever it may be.
Right.
So yeah, I think that's just been the biggest challenge so far. And yeah, I need to work out how we sort that out, because it's not just from my side. Like, I know Ali wants space and time alone and all of that as well, and how to figure that out in a situation where like we don't have parents living nearby, and so anytime that we need him looked after, it is like paying a childminder, paying a nanny, that kind of thing. So it's just not as easy as it could be, despite us having huge amounts of privileges in lots of other ways.
Yes, I get really jealous when I see like a grandparent walking a child or taking them to some class, and I'm like, oh, that would be so nice. We're in a similar situation. We have the grandparents are all on the other side of the country, and that was our choice to live here.
Yeah.
But yeah, I remember I was walking down the street one day, and this mom is like, "You're okay. You go with grandma. Mommy and daddy will be back in a few hours." And I was like, "Oh, that would be so nice." we get a babysitter sometimes, but like, it's an expense. It turns like a $100 night into like $160 night or something. And it's it's not something you can do all the time, and then you end up sacrificing your sleep too. So it's like, we don't really want to do that all the time. It'd be nice to have a daytime like grandparent that you could just have take the child.
I know. So my parents came over recently, and Ramsey's now at an age. My mom's been great. She's come over, I don't know, 6 times since he's been born, which is no small feat considering she lives in Sydney.
Yes.
And then my dad's joined her for 3 of those or 2 of those or something. But Ramsey's now at an age that he can remember, he knows who they are, and he asks for them, and we can chat on FaceTime and all that. And so when they were here, we did have some times where he would go off with them, and I was like, oh, this would be just a joy. And I know that my folks look after my brother's kids lots and just love doing that. But yeah, alas, I made the decision to move to the other side of the world. So yeah, that's on me.
Yes, I know. It's on us. I know. But it's okay. We survive. Yeah.
And what about then with Dylan and eating? So where are you at this stage?
In terms of him eating and self-feeding. So we did baby-led weaning when he was 6 months. I actually took the Feeding Littles course. I don't know if you follow them on Instagram. I love their approach to eating.
I don't. So that's a good one. I'll have to check it out.
Love their stuff. Yeah, they have a toddler course too, which I haven't taken yet, but I plan on taking it because very much about like using the Alan Satter approach and intuitive eating approach from birth, or from when your child starts eating. And again, this is one of those things, like, I chose baby-led weaning. There's nothing against doing purees or another approach or anything like that. This was just something that I wanted to try. It kind of aligned to my values, the way that I like to think about food and feeding and things like that. And so he's self feeds. He's become like a little more picky than he was when he was in the beginning. Like when he was say like 6 to 10 months old, he would sort of just eat whatever he would try whatever we would give him, and now he definitely has different preferences, and I feel like that's probably gonna get even worse, so to speak. I hate to call eating good or bad, so I'm using that worse in quotation marks, but he may become even more selective. Although he does, it's been so interesting to watch based on the work that I do. And I'm sure you felt the same way watching Ramsey eat. It's fascinating. It's kind of like observing an experiment. Cause I'm like, okay, I don't intervene at all. I let him decide. You provide, they decide is kind of the Ellen Satter way. And so, I'll give him a variety of foods, and sometimes he'll eat all of the stew, let's say, for example. And then another day he will not touch it at all. And he just only wants to eat peas, or there's one day last week where he was shoveling broccoli in his mouth, and then he started taking it off my plate and eating it. And whereas he hadn't eaten it in a month. And I was like, okay, so you realize they have, if you really let them if you trust them, that they can trust themselves, they do have this really interesting, ability to self-regulate, and definitely from a hunger fullness perspective, but also in terms of getting balance of nutrients and things like that. Because sometimes I don't express this out loud or to him or anything like that, but because of my background with food issues and my training as a nutritionist and all that stuff, that I always have to I've overcome a ton with myself, but now being a parent, some of that stuff is fired up again. I'm like, oh, he hasn't had any protein today. He needs protein, things like that. And so I've had to just really, step back and trust, because he really does self-regulate. He'll all of a sudden just eat a whole bunch of chicken, if he hasn't had protein in a couple days. And it's been really cool to witness and see that, when you let go of the reins, and let them decide, they can become really competent eaters. And I know every child is different. You can still use all these approaches and tools and still have very selective eaters, but there's a lot of sensory things that come into play, and just genetics, I think, is a huge thing for picky eaters. And so you can do all the right things, so to speak, and still have a child that's a very picky eater. So I'm not saying that you're doing something wrong if you have a child that does that, but it's been so cool to watch. And I love watching him enjoy food, which I'm trying not to love too much, because that's what my mother loved. And then food was love, because she was always like, oh, you're not going to eat that? Or please eat it. Or she was so excited when we'd eat stuff. And I'm trying not to do that, but I really do actually feel very excited when he enjoys the food I make for him, because I put my heart and soul into it. And when he just throws it on the floor, I'm like, oh, I'm so hurt by that. But at the same time, I'm like, I don't want to give him food issues. So we will just not say anything. And then when he goes to bed, I'll talk about it with Mike and just tell him about how sad I am that he didn't eat this chicken quesadilla that I spent half an hour making. What's your experience been with that?
So we did baby-led weaning as well, and also then the Ellen Satter approach. And he's been a great eater. I really liked the baby-led weaning. Once you get over the phase where you think he's going to choke, and it's just lots of gagging. But once you get through that, it's fine. And they're just exposed to so many different tastes and textures, and even outside of the eating side of things, I think that probably helped his hand-eye coordination more than anything else, because he's having to sit down, he's having to be picking up things that are slightly slippery, and so for reasons outside of eating, I think it was really beneficial. And yeah, I mean, we will have. I mean, you said, okay, Dylan's going through a more selective stage at this point, and we've had lots of times like that, and then he gets back into eating lots of things again, and then he's not eating as much. But you're right. I mean, as someone who is a big believer in intuitive eating and teaches it to adults, it's wonderful seeing someone learn that from day one, or just be presented food in a manner that means they just naturally have that occur to them. And he's now, so Rams is now two and 2 months at the point of recording this, and like he can speak a lot, so he speaks in full sentences. It's phenomenal to watch how that has come along, and like understanding tense. So like the gate is closing, the gate is closed, but he can just like verbalize so much now, and can tell you what he's thinking about in terms of food, and meals now are us being able to have more of a conversation, and what did you get up to during the day, and so yeah, mealtime for us is a really enjoyable time, and that's not to say that that's the case every time. He's definitely going through a phase where he just picks up a thing of water and just pours the whole thing on the floor, like pretty much every meal at the moment. But it just, I know for a lot of people how much mealtimes is a real battleground, and is just such a fraught experience where they're trying to get their kids to eat and all of that. And there is probably a good deal of luck that we're not in that place. But it is to be able to have a meal, and to be able to have him enjoy that. And also for me to just be like, you know what, I know he's going to be able to sort this out. So if there's a meal where he barely eats anything, it's like, it's fine. He'll get hungry again. And yes, he will eat he'll eat then more at the next meal. So yeah, despite starting nutrition and being able to put on a nutrition hat, there hasn't actually been a really strong pull with him and trying to intervene, because there is just this real belief of like, his body will tell him what he needs to do. We are preparing him with lots of different variety and lots of different food that he can enjoy, and it's then up to him to choose how he wants to do that at each meal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's so fun to watch, and and like, you watch them just get excited about certain things, and like, yeah, he can like use a spoon, and he's just figuring out a fork now on his own, and it's like, yeah, just all those little milestones are so exciting.
Yeah, definitely. And so yeah, Rams has wanted to start being involved more in the cooking process now. So he wants to help me whisk the eggs in the morning, or I don't know how or when it started, but we started making banana bread, and he just wants to make banana bread all the time now. So I think nice. that's his like favorite food at the moment. He just wants to have banana bread for snack all the time.
That's a good thing to want. I like banana bread. Do you have one of those learning towers?
Learning towers? No. So what's a learning tower?
Oh, I'll have to send you the link to one. I was going to put it on Dylan's wish list for Christmas. It's like this little stand that the toddler can stand on. So then they're at like the counter level with you, and they help you. So you can like give them stuff to help. So that it's almost like a stool, but it has kind of like I don't want to say a gate around it, but it has sides to it, so they can't just like fly off of it. I'll send you a link to one. It's called a learning tower, and then you can like bring it over to the sink, and then they can like wash dishes, like quote unquote.
So he just
wash it.
So Rams just pushes his high chair over. So his high chair no longer has the thing.
You've done the more resourceful. You've saved yourself some money instead of having like a whole other thing.
Yeah.
That's great.
The washing the dishes thing is that's just the thing at the moment, and it's basically just him using a ton of water and wetting every part of the kitchen.
Yes.
Yeah. But yeah, he enjoys it. So what the hell?
Exactly. Mess is good for them.
Yeah. And so, Lou, what about like and this can be sort of us transitioning to talk about the more work side of things. So how was it for you taking maternity leave? Like, what were there fears around this? How were you thinking around your business?
Yeah. So as I said, my initial plan was to just take 6 months. And then, once I was in it, I really wanted to extend it. And then, so I decided to extend it for a couple more months. And then it was like July. And I was like, well, I'm not going to come back in July because the summertime here is just so amazing. And we were able to go to the beach, and he was at that age where he would just sit on a beach blanket for like an hour, and I could just lay there and like he would entertain himself. And I was like, this is a great way to spend the summer. Or like we'd go to a patio. He would sit in a high chair on a patio for an hour, and like I could like hang out with a friend. And I was like, this is like the sweet spot age. So I didn't return to work in the summer because I really wanted to enjoy that time together. Plus the woman I found to look after him, she couldn't start till September anyway. So, that's besides the point. But I set up my business so that it would run automatically for 6 months, because I knew I was going to be on maternity leave for 6 months. So I had, what I did was with the podcast, I did like old, like kind of classic episodes, because the podcast has been around for 5 years. So I had episodes from like 4 years ago that I was like, you know what I'll do is I'll answer a listener question in the beginning and then replay an old interview. And so I had that going for 6 months, and I had like old blog posts that I was resharing to my email list, and I had social media that had just kind of recycled. And then some of that kind of expired after 6 months, but the social media, like I then just sort of like replayed again. So, to anyone who's a coach who's listening to this, or like a business owner, like really the biggest piece of advice I ever got when I worked with Kelly Deals, who is a feminist marketing consultant. And she said, you want to build the machine. You don't want to be the machine, in terms of like content creation and things like that. And so I really spent like a few months leading up to my maternity leave kind of building this machine so that I would be able to just go away and sort of hit play, and things would still run in my absence. And that worked out really great. And then like I said, there were a few months towards the end where I had nothing. So I was just sort of on radio silence. And so coming back, I think, I had a lot of anxiety and fear coming up around first of all, childcare, because I think that's just like a massive transition in life. And then secondly, just like worrying about, like just self-doubt around like, oh, what's going to happen? Like, am I still relevant? Are people still following me? What is that going to be like? And a lot of it was just, obviously like the voice of my inner critic. And, the other thing too was that I had gotten so comfortable, not being visible. So, when you're building an online business, visibility is a key component to that. So getting your message out there, whether it's like podcasting or social media or YouTube or however you build your business, you have to be more visible. That's how you get people to find you. And I think that for some people, that's very vulnerable, and it opens you up to a whole host of different varieties of self-doubt in terms of fear of rejection or fear of judgment and all these things. And so I'd overcome a lot of that over the years that I've been working, because you got more comfortable outside the comfort zone, and your comfort zone bubble just sort of expands, and you don't worry so much about those things. But having taken a year off, and especially having gone through that transition where I really felt like my brain wasn't functioning the way that it used to, my comfort zone sort of got quite small in that I was just very comfortable not being visible. And so the idea of kind of writing new things, producing new content, and putting my voice back out there, I had so much fear around it, and like nerves, and like I was getting into that kind of perfectionist, like over editing and over tweaking things. And so I had to kind of like work through some of that stuff again. And then, after a few weeks that went away again. But, it was hard at first. And, it was easy getting back into coaching. Like as soon as I had a couple client sessions, it was like, I hadn't been gone. I was like, that was another thing I sort of was thinking about, but it's just second nature. I mean, when I work with people, it's like, it's all just, it's very much just part of my way of being now. Which was great. And that got me fired up to do more. But, it wasn't like the easiest transition back. There was definitely like some hurdles because a year off is a long time.
Yeah. And with the content that you were talking about where it was sort of difficult and it felt more vulnerable, was that for content across the board, or was it where the content was more about like you sharing your story and like you being front and center as part of that?
No, actually, I feel like when it's me, I'm more comfortable sharing those things for some reason, even though I'm not like closer people in my life, but for the internet, I have no problem talking about my personal life. Figure that one out. I don't know. And then, no, it was more like coming up with like, writing, like whether it would be blog posts or social media posts or things like that, where, I was, I don't know. I just was like, am I making sense? Like, have I said this before? Like, I was overthinking things way too much. And like, just thinking like, who's going to like this? And also in terms of like launching my program and stuff like that. So, it was an interesting thing to go through just because I hadn't had to deal with those demons in a while.
Yeah. And I think the more like it is like a muscle, the more you're regularly doing it, the more you just get into the groove of that. And then the longer you have a break, especially, I mean, for me anyway, especially with writing, I find that more difficult if I'm not doing it on a regular basis. And that it just, it feels, just more challenging to start. And it's amazing. There can be articles that will literally take me 8 to 10 hours to write, and then there'll be something else that I can bash out in, I don't know, 2 or 3. And that's pretty much as short as it'll take me. I don't know, there's people who are like, I can write something in half an hour. And that is just not me. But I definitely know that there is a difference with when I'm in the right mode and the right headspace versus when I'm not, and just how much it feels like the cogs are turning so slowly. And a lot of the time, if I have that feeling, even within about 20 minutes, I'm like, scratch this. It's not going to happen today, and I'll pick it up tomorrow, because it's just, this is going to be a colossal waste of my time, and I'm going to pick it up tomorrow and rewrite a lot of it anyway. So I will I'll just start again tomorrow.
Yeah, and the other thing that I was going to say around that, and I don't know if you noticed this too, because we both sort of mentioned that we're trying to do the same amount of work in like a lot less hours, is I don't have time to kind of mince my words. I don't have time to like over edit like I used to. Like I would write something and then reread it the next day and then tweak it and then like come back to it a few days later and tweak it again. And now I don't have time for that. So it's like, you get my first draft and that is it. And obviously I edit it and I usually give it a day, but I don't have time. And I think because of that, it's also helped me be just more honest, more real, like just get stuff out there that I want to say, instead of kind of going back and like maybe watering it down or taking out some stuff that I'm like, are people going to like that? I don't have time to do that. I don't know. So it's a little more unfiltered, which I feel like it's actually probably landed better with some people. Yeah. And it's a positive thing for me too, because I don't have time for the doubt. Like, it's like, we don't have time for this. This has to go out now. So it's going out as is. And I think it's also like an interesting experiment that people can do for themselves, even if they don't have children, is just like kind of, don't necessarily go with your rough first draft, but write one and then try to only edit it maybe once and then like send it out. I think that's, I always kind of talk about like not letting your perfectionist tendencies like stall your growth, because it can really cause you to kind of play small and you get stuck in like that editing cycle. And it's really just kind of like a hiding strategy. And so when I didn't have time for my hiding strategy, I just had to sort of like hit the gas and put stuff out there. And I don't know if you've had the same thing because you're trying to do things in less amount of time.
So I used to spend a lot of my walking time basically writing an article in my mind. And so I'd be I'd have an idea and I'd mull it over and I'm like, okay, that would be good. And I can connect that other point. And so I would be just constantly thinking things over. And so at the point at which I then had to write it, I had a bit of a concept of how it would go. And then sometimes I would finish the article and it would be different to how I thought. And that was just what came out. But there was a lot more thinking and editing and all of that going on prior to actually sitting down. And now, and so what I used to do, like my process was, I'd then, like in the early days, I'd send it to Ali to proof and just make sure grammatically it was correct. And then I had an intern and she would do it. And then more recently I had another intern, Drew, who is now sort of operations and marketing director here, and she's the one who then edits it and will give me good, honest feedback. So I recently wrote an article and I just sent it over to her and I was like, I think this is a bit rambly and I think I might not have hit the right points here and I think I might be sounding like I'm standing on a soapbox. And I got a pretty blunt email back and I'm like, cool, this needs a complete rewrite. And so that won't be seeing the light of day for a while. But yeah, I'm also of the opinion if you're getting to the end of it and you're like, I think I've done a good job here and I think I've got the points that I want to make, then put it out. I was listening to a podcast called How to Fail. I think it's How to Fail, something like that, by a lady called Elizabeth Day, and she interviews different people on their failures in life and what they've learned from those failures. And one of the episodes with the author James Frey, who wrote A Million Tiny Pieces, and he just talked about the fact that his first draft is the final book. And he was like, I don't take notes, I don't take edits. The first draft is what people see because that's the way that I write. And I was like, okay, that is something I've never heard before from a published author, especially someone of his ilk. But if that works for him, that works for him.
Yeah, that's so interesting. Well, I don't know if it really worked. I mean, it's a great book, but it's not all true, right?
Well, it's not. Yeah, so it's not all true. And he actually talked about that part of it, and he was like, it doesn't matter that it's not all true. It's meant to be a narrative, and I'm trying to tell a story. And we talked about like going on Oprah and being publicly shamed, and he was like, it didn't actually bother me too much. Like he was like, I've been a drug addict for many, many years. Like there's a lot bigger things that have happened to me that I care about than Oprah being upset with me. Yeah.
Oh, fascinating. I'll have to check that out.
Yeah. And so I think it'd be good to go back. I know we're talking sort of more recently, but kind of go back through what it's been like for you running your business. And I know you touched on this a bit in the intro, but I think this is a quote from one of your pieces where you said, the reality is that entrepreneurship is filled with moments of failure, disappointment, self-doubt, and feeling defeated in our tear-soaked pajamas, and everything takes longer than you think or want it to. So yeah, tell me, or tell the listeners, like your journey from start to here, just because I think it can be quite instructive. And I'm going to do the same because I think people have this real misconception because they're not seeing what goes on behind closed doors.
Yes. I think it's like, I love talking about this stuff. It's one of my favorite things to kind of spill in the coaches' emails that obviously you read. So, it's such a misconception because I think that, and this was something I talked about when I was on, when Kyla interviewed me for her, Your Body, Your Brand podcast. But, you have this idea that, you just will start a blog or start a website or get a coaching certificate or nutrition or whatever. And then, you'll have like clients come to you. Or you just have to kind of come up with like one really great idea and like an online program, and then like you'll just be sitting on piles of money. And I think that, it very, very rarely that happens. I think maybe in some like extremely rare cases that can happen, because I don't want to say that it's impossible. However, I do think a lot of times those people, have driven themselves into the ground to do that as well. I think that, it's such a learning curve. And, in terms of my journey, like specifically, I mean, like I said, I think I started like my first nutrition blog in 2009. So that was 10 years ago. I've certainly had a lot of like failures and disappointments since then. Just learning curve things along the way. And I think that one of the biggest things is that like so much of our job, at least in the beginning, maybe not for you now, for me a little bit because I'm back from maternity leave, but is kind of doing the marketing and the sales around yourself and selling yourself and coming up with programs and things like that and marketing them. And I think that, you don't really get taught that in like whatever coaching program you're in or whatever nutrition program you've taken. They don't really talk about the business side of things or teach you that. And there can be a lot of mishaps that happen as a result if you're not really focusing on that kind of strategically. And even if you are focusing on it strategically, you're still going to have moments of failure and disappointment because you are so passionate about this thing that you've created. And so if you don't reach your targets or your goals, if you don't get the likes that you're kind of anticipating, I think for a lot of people, it can take a giant hit on your self-worth. And so having to kind of untangle that from self-worth has been something that I have done a lot of work around myself. It's something that I help other coaches with in my mentoring with them. Because if you are looking at your business as like part of you, as like your business is your baby, which a lot of us do, then you're going to be crushed if you get negative criticism or feedback, if you have somebody asking for a refund, if you launch something that is to crickets, which I can talk more specifically about some of those if you want. But, like all of those things are hard to take regardless, but extremely hard to take if your self-worth is linked to them, and actually can then cause you to like play small, stay more hidden, because you don't want to have to go through that again. Because it is so traumatic if your self-worth is connected to the success. And so detaching those two things is super, super important. I don't know if I answered your question. I feel like I might have kind of just like jumped to a slightly different topic, but that's really the evolution.
Okay. Cool. And so, I mean, if I'm thinking back to me, so I started my business in 2009 and similar to you, and it just, it took, I would say, the best part of 5 years to get decent amount of traction. And so for good chunks of that, I was having to work another job or multiple other jobs, and then quit, and then realized that I wasn't able to do it and had to go back and find other jobs to get to a place. And then even after that, like I was still like, it wasn't like I then hit financial freedom. It was then still just working many, many hours every week, and just trying to eke out an existence to get to a place where the business could be supporting me in a decent way. And I think there's just, this misconception that you'll start out and it will instantly be there, or even like, oh, I've been doing this for 2 years, or I've been doing this for 3 years. Like, why isn't it there? And I just, my thoughts are, it just takes a lot more time. And it takes time because you like, just because you've done a course, and it doesn't matter whether that's a kind of a weekend course or you've done like a 4-year dietetics course, like you still come out a complete newbie with everything, and still unsure of, okay, how do I work with clients effectively? How do I build up a practice effectively? How do I talk about what I do? How do I reach people so that they want to then become clients? Like, there's so many different components to that, and it just really does take a long time. And so, yeah, I just want to just make sure that people are aware of that, so they don't think that, oh, why after 2 years am I not hitting the big time?
Yeah. So similar to you, it was like over 4 years that it took me to have it be my sole source of income. So I always had side gigs prior to that. And even then I was teaching the business course at the Institute of Holistic Nutrition. So that was more of a passion project than like an income generator, but it was still a side gig. Like, I was still paid for that as a part-time job. And so I eventually had to stop that just because it was taking too many hours away from working on my business. But when I taught that course, I would tell people like how many years it takes and help them understand, like, okay, pricing your services, let's break it down. Like, how many clients do you have to get to make X amount of money? And like, sometimes it would be like kind of almost like scared straight, because like they would realize like, oh my God, I have to get like this many clients to get kind of like not even that much income. And then how am I going to get those clients? But the reason why I did that with them was to really just kind of show, one, to generally, price your services higher than you think, because most people, I think, kind of undervalue themselves, especially women. And two, like, to give yourself time and think about this stuff kind of strategically. Like, don't just like get out of school and then like think like, okay, I'm going to do this, I'm going to make money. Like, get a side job, do that, like work this on the side and build it up. And that's so important. And so yeah, it took me years as well, for it to be my sole source of income. And even then there were some times where, I would be awake at night, like just stressing about what was going to be coming in the next month. It wasn't until the last, like small handful of years that, I really felt comfortable and like, okay, it's going to be okay. And I was able to fund my maternity leave, which was a big deal for me. So, yeah, I think there's a lot of false marketing out there. It's like a lot of the business coaches sort of sell like this overnight success story, or I made $30,000 with my first launch. And yeah, some people do, and those things are possible. The one thing they don't always say is what the profits were. I think that's the second, like, a good follow-up question. Did you have adrenal fatigue afterwards is another good question. and in rare cases it is possible, but that's not the way that I kind of, when I coach other coaches, like, I really have them sort of look at the long-term game and really, hone your craft, build up your business, like build up a network of colleagues, really figure out like what you love to do, where you want to spend your time, how you best work with people. Don't just kind of come out the gate with like a group program that you think is going to make like $100,000 and expect it to. Like, that's probably unrealistic. Yeah.
Definitely. And I also think there's something that's good about it being a slow burn and you building up there. Like the thought of me just coming out when I qualified and then suddenly making headlines in the newspaper and getting a book deal and all that terrifies me, because I'm like, I don't have the ability to do those things, and I shouldn't be making it into the public eye in that way, because it's early days. And so I often think the overnight success people, and overnight success in inverted commas is like how are they feeling about that? How, because I mean, it takes so long to get over the whole imposter syndrome, and that's getting over imposter syndrome when I've got a blog that barely anyone's reading, let alone when you're then doing that when you're getting huge amounts of attention.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. Well, and it's interesting because people who are really big on social media will then, come out and say, actually, I've really been struggling with it, like terrible anxiety for the last month. And you realize that sometimes there's a lot of it's really taking a toll on people's mental health to be so visible.
Yeah.
Depending on how you structure your business, not everyone needs to be like Instagram famous to have a business, like at all. But I think there's a misconception that you do, and some people do, and that's, the route that they've chosen, which is totally fine. But you kind of have to ask yourself, like, what am I taking on? Like, can I handle that? Like, do I want that responsibility? And shift your business so that it's going to also give you the mental health that you want as well, Yeah. I think if I had 1 million followers on Instagram, it would probably take quite a toll on my mental health. But I suppose then I could spend a lot more money on therapy. I would just have a full-time therapist to help me.
Well, I mean, the thing is, I don't know if that necessarily always translates into having a bigger business. I think there are a lot of people with a lot of followers who also still then struggle to translate that into actually making money off of it.
I agree. I 100% agree with that. I don't think it always, you make a lot of assumptions. I think what we're both kind of getting at is that you make a lot of assumptions. I think you see other people and you think oh, it was so easy for them, or, oh, if only I did that, then I could be successful. But I'm putting success in quotation marks. I think it's, we really don't know what's going on behind the scenes in a person's life, in their headspace, in their bank account. But our mind pieces these things together in the same way that we kind of do with diet culture. We sort of assume oh, if I lose weight, my life is going to be great. I'll become more desirable. I'll meet someone. I'll have a really happy life, and I'll be confident. When that's not necessarily true at all.
Yeah, definitely. And you maybe touched on some of this earlier when you talked about certain courses you've done, but yeah, what have been some of the things that you've done where you're like, okay, this helped me the most as a practitioner? So in terms of, I really learned some good skills here that really helped me to be able to help people.
Yeah. So I think, I really loved the course I took with Tara Moore because it is so focused on, self-doubt and fear, and just kind of taking her model and her tools and really applying them to more body image specific concerns, and looking at kind of self-worth overall. That to me really gave me a lot more confidence in really niching with the body image and the confidence and the self-worth, because I was able to just sort of have a lot of tools to work with people around that. But it's just honing your craft. I think with any coach, you have to kind of find your way of coaching. And I know this gets kind of woo woo, but a lot of it is really instinctual. When I'm working with people, it's very just instinctual and intuitive, and it's kind of just being in the moment, and I'll kind of adapt and throw things in and do stuff with people that really ends up resonating. And sometimes I'm I don't know where that came from, but it just was there. And so I'm not trying to say I have the special gift, but I think that if you're trying to be like another coach, or you're trying to just kind of follow a coaching handbook, it doesn't always translate into good coaching. I think the more that you can kind of really be present, be in the moment, just listen and kind of go with your gut, the more impactful it can be. And that might be slightly different for you because maybe you do more prescriptive stuff, especially with nutrition and things like that. But with me, it's more getting to kind of the feeling stuff underneath. And that can happen really nicely in the moment if you let it, and you kind of take the sort of preconceived agenda out of it.
Yeah. And my sense with your description there, though, is your ability to be intuitive is also because you've done so much of this work. And so you've worked with so many people, you've read so many things. So your intuition is pulling on all of those things unconsciously.
Yes.
I don't, someone straight out of the gate trying to use intuition, I don't think is necessarily going to work because they don't have intuitions to be able to guide them.
That is, yes, that is a good way to say it. I don't think it's all that, but I do think that there's pieces of it in there that are important to include once you kind of have the tools and the skills from like a coaching program. Because like, for example, the CTI coaching program, like that's a life coaching program. Like they don't talk about like body image or anything like that in there, but being able to, having done like so much reading, research, body image and things like that, and then taking those tools and sort of being able to see like, okay, if I adapt it this way, like I can use this technique related to, helping someone work through a photo or helping someone stop compare themselves to somebody else. Like that's how I kind of am able to take those frameworks and then modify them or kind of make them my own with a particular issue around confidence or self-worth, which, So, it's hard for me to say like what helped me the most, but I think honestly, I think it's like honing my craft to be like just experience and like the number of people that I've had the gift of working with over the years. Yeah.
And I think that ability, as you say, to be able to take something and then take the good bits or to reframe it in the way that you're going to be able to use it or to see how that would fit into this other thing that you do, I think is super helpful. Because I mean, one of the things that, if I'm thinking of programs or courses that would really helped me was the Precision Nutrition Level 2 program. But I have a lot of issues with the program. I have a lot of issues with precision nutrition just because they're not coming at things from a health at every size approach. There is a lot of focus on weight loss. But at the same time, there was a huge amount of really great stuff that I got out of that.
Yes.
Where it is just so well rounded. So I was able to be like, you know what, there's a good chunk of this that is just not for me, but there's other parts where it was really enlightening, and I'm really grateful I did it. But it's that kind of thing of being unsure of how I would recommend it to someone, or if I would recommend it to someone, or I'd recommend it in these circumstances. But I'm able to get out of what I needed to and just leave the rest.
Yeah, which is great. It's unfortunate that there isn't something that is like that doesn't have the diet culture infused in it.
Yeah, definitely. And so one of the things that you talked about in one of your emails that I really want to focus on was just around like being able to validate clients' feelings and not going to fix mode, because I think that's often the tendency. So just talk a little about that.
Yeah. So I think, our tendency as coaches is to help people feel better, and in life generally, even just as a friend or, a colleague, like you want to help the people around you feel better. But as someone who's a coach, like as a coach, we need to help them feel their feelings and get to some of the stuff underneath. And so when I talk about fixing feelings, that really involves skipping over some of the discomfort and to focus on things more positive as soon as possible. So trying to think of an example, like if a client is feeling upset because of an experience they had, maybe it was like they saw themselves in a picture or they felt judged, fixing their feelings would be like, just kind of trying to brush over it. Like, it's just one picture. Like what's positive about that memory? Like what can you focus on instead? Or if they're feeling judged by somebody else, saying something like, what people say has nothing to do with you. let's talk about what's something positive that we can say to themselves. And so, that doesn't necessarily sound like bad advice. Like, all of those things are all valid, but what we're really missing there is like helping clients to feel their feelings and really acknowledge their feelings. So that would look a little bit different. It would look more like, oh, like that must be really hard. What feelings come up when you look at that picture? Or, what was that like when that person said that to you? And kind of staying with that feeling. And I think a lot of times we, it's uncomfortable to be in the discomfort with somebody else. Like even when someone is going through something hard, we sort of, it's hard to kind of like stay in that space with them. Most of us want to like avoid discomfort with a 10-foot pole. And so we try to like be the positive one, or like, oh, well, at least you don't have cancer, like something like that, which is just horrible. But, it's kind of getting away from saying things like that, and really helping, like really trying to empathize and let them feel their feelings and be in it. Because when they're in that, that's actually when I think the bigger shifts happen, because otherwise we're kind of just bypassing some of the more difficult things, and we're not really validating that it's okay to feel that way. And so then therefore, they may internalize it as like, oh, discomfort is bad, I shouldn't feel this way. I should really be more positive, which is not the outcome that we want. We want them to make space for those feelings, know that they're safe, know that they're okay, know that they're validated. And then let's talk about moving through them, or ways that we can just comfort and be compassionate with ourselves as we experience them.
Yeah, definitely. And I think I agree with you as well. It's in those moments that it's good to do some exploring around, okay, what are you feeling? How is this coming up for you? What was it that's so difficult about this? And getting to better understand that, and also having clients and just people in general be better with sitting with and dealing with discomfort, and not have the knee-jerk reaction be like, I've got to change this instant, but being able to be like, oh, okay, this is sucks, and this is also interesting, and what's going on here, and why am I feeling like this, and yeah, being okay with that, and not sort of being afraid that I've got to get out of this place instantly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. And I think it's like the best way to approach it is just like with curiosity, even within ourselves. As a coach, we can approach it with curiosity with our clients, but within ourselves, we can be curious too. Like, just like, what is that feeling I have in my chest right now when I talk about this? Or, what is it about that experience that really made me feel heavy, or anything else that comes up. And when we approach things with curiosity, it lightens it a little bit. It allows us to still feel the harder stuff, but without it kind of defining who we are, making it feel like we're going to be trapped in that space forever.
Yeah. And I definitely consults or when having chats with clients, there are times where it is more difficult, and there's things like you were just referring to there, but it's always a good sign when there is also laughter as part of that, and not at always the exact same moments, but throughout it, where you can see that there is those that ability to be able to laugh about things, but to just not take things so seriously, and also just be able to see how emotions can change in a very quick moment. And so, for me, when there is just a little bit of lightheartedness, it feels like there's movement more in the right direction.
Yes, I 100% agree. And I think when my dad died 2 months ago, and when I went to find a counselor, that was something that I put in. I was like, I need a counselor with a bit of a sense of humor, because I need just those little punches of it. And she's really good at that. If, she'll just kind of punch something in at the right time, just to kind of, not really see the ridiculousness in grief because that's not really that applicable. But, I guess the circumstances around some of the stuff that I'm going through. And like, I do that with clients too. And I think it's like, especially when we're talking about like diet culture, it is like, it's important to see the ridiculousness in that too. Like, it's like, what are we really expecting of ourselves here? That the way that society has told us to, be all of the, like, don't be too loud. You got to be more, but you want to speak up, and like, don't be too nice, but, you don't want to be mean, like all these things. So it's just, when you can kind of see the expectations that have been put on us, it's definitely ridiculous. Like, that's one thing that I like to infuse when I'm working with people too, is just a little bit of humor, amongst, sometimes there's tears, but that's okay.
Yeah. And I think it just then brings in sort of a human element where this is what happens when you're having conversations with friends, and that there is like an ability to have a laugh. I'm going to have at some point Josie Geller on the podcast, and so I've been going through a lot of the research that she's been doing, and it focuses a lot on like how to be a better practitioner. It's looking at sort of motivations with clients and how you can be best working with those kind of things, and some of the qualitative research that she's done, where there've been people that have been interviewed with sort of fairly severe eating disorders. They talk about the fact that by having their practitioner be able to kind of laugh and share a joke, like they're able to just see that they're able to kind of get past all the difficulty with it all, and so it doesn't have to be just also medical and also serious and all, and there's just like there just adds this lightness to it, where for a lot of times they don't get any of that. Right.
Yeah, my friend Carrie Ann Livingstone is like, she's really good at that because she does really deep emotional work with people, and then she just is hilarious at the same time. And that's where I got that quote. Like, there's a quote I always repeat, and it's just like, somebody hates you. And sometimes I'll throw that in with clients, like, we're really exploring like fear of being judged and stuff, and I'll be like, well, somebody hates you. It's like, well, oh yeah, that is true. Okay. We can kind of make fun of that. But I think it is important to have that variance for sure. And that's something that you have to look for if you're working with a coach or a therapist or anything like that. It's like, you can find someone who's going to have the things that you want. And if you want those things, just find someone else who has them.
Yeah. Definitely. So look, I know we're running short on time now, but yeah, one of the things I wanted to just ask you about or give you a chance to sort of promote is your program, You on Fire. So yeah, tell the listeners a little about that.
Sure. So I have a 3-month group coaching program that is dedicated to, it's really kind of like a body image and self-worth makeover, so to speak. So it's about, discovering who you are beyond your body size and dieting and food. I think that, once people have done some intuitive eating, then oftentimes they realize like, oh, still got some like fear of weight gain or some body image stuff here. Or they don't know who they are outside of their focus on food and exercise or their health. And I kind of use health in quotation marks when your focus on health is unhealthy. But, and so this is really about like discovering who you are outside of those things and, really helping people to develop new beliefs about themselves and, operating in a way that, values who they are. So, we cover specific things like overcoming, comparisons, overcoming fear of weight gain, working through seeing yourself in pictures, changing your relationship to movement now that you've healed your body image and, just discovering like your values and who you are and things like that. So, that'll run again. It runs 2 times a year, at least for now. And so anyone can go to my website, summerinnanen.com, to get on the wait list for that and find out when the next cycle is going to go live. And then, I also do mentoring with coaches, as I sort of alluded to. So I have like a coach's email list that is at summerinnanen.com / I should probably know the URL. I'll give it to you for the show notes. But
Okay,
I send out like a specific email to coaches once a month. It's one of my favorite things to write. And so I do mentorships with that, whether it's like coaches who want to incorporate body image work into their practice, or if you want just help around like business strategy or working through the self-doubt that comes up around being an entrepreneur. I sort of do all of those things either at once or, depending on what you need, one of those specific things with other coaches, which I love doing too.
Nice. Well, look, I would highly recommend for people who want to check out someone's program to do that. And for any coaches, like I love getting someone's email. Like that was, I can't remember at what point, but I got one of them from you, and I just sent an email back saying, I would like to have you on the podcast to chat about this, because this is some really good stuff in here. So yeah, I'm glad that you're sending them out. They are really beneficial.
Thank you. I love writing, and those ones I write really quickly. I don't know, they just like roll off my tongue. I feel like I have a lot to say around stuff like that, because not a lot of people talk about the sort of, I don't want to say dark side, but the stuff that goes on behind the scenes and the doubt and just kind of overcoming some of those things. So I love to bring that to the forefront. Nice.
Well, look, thank you so much for coming on the show. We can do this again in 4 years' time and do a part 3.
Thank you so much, guys.
So that is it for this episode. As I said at the beginning, we are in the process of taking on new clients. If you are wanting help, please get in contact. You can do that by going to www.7-health.com/help, and you can read more about how we work and apply for a free initial chat.
Thanks for listening to Real Health Radio. If you are interested in more details, you can find them at the 7 Health website. That's www.7-health.com.